In this video, we're going to look at the way we view our footage here in Avid Media Composer. We're going to look at some, sometimes you may do something in Media Composer and it ends up looking great on your timeline, but whenever you export it, your footage may end up looking much darker or perhaps much lighter even. So we're going to go into that. We're going to go into color spaces. We're going to go into our import settings and our export settings and learn a little bit about how they work here, and also consider where our media is going to. Is it going to YouTube? If it's going to YouTube, maybe we should use a full scale setting or a legal range video setting. We're going to go into all of that, just sort of touch on it, just so you're aware of all of the options here in Avid Media Composer. And keep in mind, everything I'm talking about, well, most everything, especially the things like color levels, importing, and things like that, will apply to any other non-linear editor, whether it's Premiere Pro, Final Cut, or what have you. But we're going to focus on Media Composer here. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first off, let's go ahead and consider what are we seeing here in Avid Media Composer. Now we have a lot to get through. I'm not going to cover every single thing in detail here. I just want to make you aware of all of your options here in Media Composer and whatever video editor you happen to be using. And then at the end of the video, I'll link you to another video by Avid that will go into the aspects, the technical aspects of color range. All right, but in this video, I really just want to get you up to speed so you know that these options exist. Okay, so first off, what are we seeing here in Avid Media Composer? Whenever we view on our source monitor, our record monitor, or even full screen, you may not know this, but we actually have different options that we can use to view our media. So let's check out this clip right here, which I've darkened with an effect called Film Color. This is from New Blue Effects. So I've darkened this clip. It's the same clip here. I just put it in black and white, and I made it pretty dark there. So let's Control Shift F to go to full screen. You see that there? Okay. That looks good. Now, what if we export this at full range? What's that going to look like? And you'll say, full range, what's that? Well, we have to understand our color spaces here in Avid Media Composer. What are we using to view this here in this full screen view? What are we using to view our source and our record monitor? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, that could be one reason why you may color something in Media Composer here. Then whenever you go to export it, it looks much darker. So right now, let's head over here to our settings here, settings tab. Come down here to full screen playback, double click on this. And you can see right now our display color space is on project. Now let's change our full screen playback to REC709 Full Range. Now there's a limited range or a broadcast range of 16 for your blacks to 235 for your whites, and then full range will be 0 to 255. We're not going to get way into this stuff. You probably won't be using these here unless you know you need them, okay? This video is more for beginners, intermediate, people who just wonder why their footage isn't looking the same whenever they upload it to YouTube. Professionals will already know what this means. And you may use sRGB from time to time, but we'll focus on project, which for me is going to be REC709. So either one of these I choose, I'm going to look exactly the same. So Control Shift F, full screen, you can see that's going to look exactly the same, even if I have it on project. But now pay attention to this area of her eyes, her forehead, her hair, the detail we get in this. Come back to full screen playback. Now let's put this to full range. Oftentimes when you upload something to the web, YouTube used to specify full range. They no longer do that. We'll just put this on full range for now. So now our blacks should be 0 and our highs, our whites should be 255. Don't worry about what that means. Just take a look at this image now. Look at that. Look at the difference in this, how much darker this is than it was if we had this on REC709 or project, either one in this case. See the difference? All right, so that's one aspect you need to be aware of. If you're exporting everything in your timeline, you'll say, well, this all looks great to me. This looks perfect. And then you export it, and it looks much darker. Put it back on full range. That's why, because you export it as full range, and this is what you're going to end up getting. Okay. Again, not going into the real technical aspects of this. We're just making sure you're aware, but just be aware of this setting here. If you want to check sRGB, we can do that too. Just see what that looks like. Okay. So all these color spaces are a little bit different. The ones I usually always check are the REC709 and then REC709 Full Range. So the video you are watching right now is indeed exported with scale from legal to full range. And the reason I have to do that is so you can really tell the differences here. Okay, so that's the first thing. The first setting that you really need to be aware of is your full screen playback whenever you hit your Control-Shift-F. I'm on Windows, by the way, so Control-Shift-F, and you look at your media. Okay, if it's on project, which is it's going to be on project by default. For me, it's going to be REC709 broadcast, and you look at your footage in here, and then you export it full range, and it gets on YouTube, and it looks too dark. That's that's the reason, because you exported it as a full range. But just be aware of this setting right here. I would usually leave this, again, because I'm going to export as full range. I'd probably leave this on full range. So I'm going to actually leave that there. But we actually have more viewing options. We can actually change the viewing options here in our source and record monitors as well to test. So let's go ahead and see that now. I'll go, let's see here. Let's get the same clip right here. All right, so both of these monitors, let's try to get her about the same frame or so. Both of these monitors here, if we right click, you can come down here to display color space, and we're on project. That's probably where you're going to want to leave it. If you start viewing this in different color spaces and making your decisions based on what you're viewing it as, and then you export it as something other than that, other than what you're actually viewing, and of course your format, your color space that you're working in comes into play, as well as your, let's find it here, your import settings will come into play as well. If you're viewing it as something else in your windows here, then you're going to have a problem as well. So you'll probably want to leave this as project, but you can change this here in Media Composer as well. So this is on project, which is the same as REC709 for me. What if we come over here to our record monitor, right click, we can actually change the color space for this window here as well. So let's put this one on full range. Wow, did you see that? You see the different dynamics in this, and we didn't have to go to full screen to see that. This whole video here is going to be up on YouTube, where you can actually check out these different color levels for yourself on YouTube, so you can sort of get an idea of what your footage will look like once you get it on YouTube. So I'll link to those videos too. And there's two videos. One of them will export with scale from legal to full range. The other one exports with keep as legal. But we're going to get to that in just a minute there. All right. So again, keep this setting in mind. I would really suggest you pay attention to this. If I went to sRGB, that looks way different. If I do all my editing in sRGB and I export as something else, then my footage is going to look completely different once I export it. Now, keep in mind these changes that we make here to our display color space. Okay, we can go to this one as well, which you won't use this one unless you know that you need it. All right. So every change I'm making here does not affect my actual video file. Okay, it doesn't even affect our export. So either one of these, no matter what I change them to, our display color spacing, and change it to any of these, it's not going to actually affect the clip. It's just how we are viewing the clip. Okay, and this is the main reason why your footage will look good in Media Composer, and then you export it and it looks too dark or too light. Okay, so that's the second sort of viewing setting you need to be aware of. Okay, just right click on either of these monitors, display color space. I would suggest leaving it as project, unless you just want to check out full range perhaps, or you have a monitor that you need one of these other settings for. I would leave it at project personally, but just be aware that those settings are indeed there. Okay, so let's move on here, and we can check more clips here. Now, you may notice this is actually a good example here. This is on project, okay, which is going to be REC709. Okay, now again, the video you're watching now is exported at full range, okay? but you'll still be able to see this area right here in this video here. Okay. See that grayish color, that dark color. And now look at the actual color that I'm recording right now in Media Composer where we're doing this edit. You can see it's darker. That's because we're viewing this in the broadcast range, or we're, in REC709 versus the full range, which you're seeing the full range down here. So you can see the difference in the colors. Now, if I go to full screen on this, okay, well, that looks exactly the same, doesn't it? Now, if I just click anywhere, full screen will go away and we'll go back to the Media Composer I'm using right now. I understand this gets a little bit confusing, but look at this area right here. I'm going to click and it looks exactly the same. Same exact colors there, right? See that? Now, if I were to go back to full screen playback and change this to project or REC709, now when I go to full screen here, again, look at this color. You see that color? That dark blackish, dark gray color. Now again, I'm going to click. Now you see the difference again, because we exported this video at full range. So you're able to see the full range there. You see the difference? Again, Control Shift F. Look at this. And then look at this. All right. So that's actually a pretty good example of that color space there and what it means to your video. Okay. Now let's move on to importing footage. Again, this here video, meaning the one that's literally on this timeline here, will actually be a standalone video that you'll be able to watch on YouTube. We'll get to that in a minute, but I've imported this same graphic 3 different ways. And I'll just show you this in real time here. Go to bins. Let me do a new bin. Let's just call this, I'm just going to call this bin 2, just so I don't get confused. Go ahead and open that up. We're just going to throw it way over here. All right. And then we'll come into right here. And I have my graphic right here. This is the actual graphic. This is the legal one that I actually exported out of Media Composer. We'll get to that in a minute. So right now, I want to show you our import settings and how that's going to affect our color settings. So coming back here to settings, come here to import. Now, right now we have this scale from full range to legal range. We'll start up here with do not modify, treat as legal range. And you can see if we hover over this, select this option if the color levels of the media are already within the legal range. Now, I don't know if your media will be within the legal range. I know that this graphic is not within the legal range because it's a graphic. Computer graphics, computer videos, like this video here is being captured with Camtasia, and it's on a computer, so it's going to be RGB. It's going to be exported from Camtasia with an RGB color profile, at a pretty high level with the DNxHD Avid codecs, way too high than you really need to use, but it will be exported as RGB and then brought back into Media Composer. Okay. So just keep in mind, if you have graphics, things like that, you may want to scale those, you may not. It can be an artistic decision, but a lot of times you may want to go ahead and actually scale those. So if we highlight this, select this option if media uses the full range RGB graphic levels, 0 to 255. All right, whereas this one is if it's already legal, that means your colors are already 16 to 235. So we're going to start here, do not modify, treat as legal range. Click OK. And we're just going to import this, and I'm going to import it just by pulling it in. And there it is. So now let me go ahead and double click, and we'll see it right here. Looks okay. Again, you have to remember, how are we viewing this? We're viewing this as project. And if we go to full screen again, it's the same as project, REC709. So now if we view this in legal range, okay, that looks fine, right? But what if we view this at full scale? Come to full screen playback. Like I said, I like to leave my full screen at full range. So now let's view it. Not bad, but it is kind of dark. You'll actually be able to tell that. We'll look at this here, down here, in a minute, but let's go ahead and make sure that's on project. Okay. Which it is. Let's go ahead and come back to import. And now we're going to scale from full range to legal range, because this is indeed a graphic and we know that we should probably scale this. Get my bin back open here. And we'll import the same exact file. And let me just click over here so you can see this. Now we're going to load up the image that was scaled. Oh, you see the difference all of a sudden? Big difference. Now, if we view this in full screen, now it looks good because we're viewing this at full screen, and our full screen view method is REC709 Full Scale. So now it looks proper. It looks like the actual picture here. If I bring it up, now it looks like the actual picture, right? Whereas this file here, viewed full screen, is a bit dark. Okay. Now, what if we took this file, which I actually already have, and I made it, we imported it at a legal range here, right? But then we came to export. We came up here to graphic, and we chose a PNG or JPEG or whatever. And instead of scale from legal to full range, we just kept it as keep as legal range. Now, I've already done that. So right here is that file that is already at legal range. This graphic that's at legal range. Let me grab this other one here so you can see them side by side. All right. So this graphic here is the graphic. This graphic here is the one that's been edited in Media Composer and spit out as a legal range. Okay. This is the legal range. This is the actual graphic with RGB colors. This is 16 to 235. This is 0 to 255. This is going to be very important for your graphics that you pull into Media Composer. See the difference? Okay. So if I took this file and now, let me go back to import. Now do not modify treat as a legal range. That would possibly be good, right? Okay, well, let's see. Grab it, throw it in here. Now here's the legal. Control Shift F. Ah, looks good, right? Looks good. Because we're viewing that in full screen with the full range. Because it's illegal, we imported it as legal because it was legal. That's how we would import it, again, most of the time. Now, what if we scaled from full range to legal range? Let's put that option on there. Now, again, remember, this picture here is illegal, already the legal colors. So what happens if we have something that's illegal and we pull it in saying, go ahead and scale this from full to legal? Now what happens? Well, now let's look at this. Well, now that doesn't look good at all, does it? See that sort of white cast over this? Control Shift F. It looks okay, but it's not actually right. Okay. And again, we're viewing this in full screen at full range, and the video you're watching right now is at full range. Okay. If we view this as at the project settings, that doesn't look right at all, does it? Okay. Now all this comes into play whenever we finally get out to our export settings. I usually export a QuickTime movie. I like to do same as source. And if you're going to the web, a lot of times they're going to say, scale it from legal to full. It sort of depends. Some services will go ahead and scale a legal video to full range. Some don't, but your user comes into play in this as well. I'll get to that in a minute. We don't need to make this a really super long video because I'm going to link you to something else that will explain this in more technical detail. I just want you to understand these options here in Media Composer or whatever NLE you happen to have. Okay, so just remember all of that stuff that I'm talking about on the import. Okay, if something is legal range, okay, don't modify it. Go ahead and treat it as legal range. If it's full range, go ahead and scale it to the legal range, unless you don't want to. Okay, so we didn't scale everything in here to legal range like this here. We just I think this is the one we treated as this RGB graphic. We just treated it as legal, and you can see how much darker that is versus this one here. Okay, so that can be an artistic choice as well. I just want you to be aware of that. And again, let me go and close this. You also need to be aware of your display color space, what you're actually looking at. So be sure to check these. You'll probably go between 709 and 709 full range and maybe sRGB, as well. It really depends on your monitor as well. You may not be seeing exactly what I'm seeing. We can see that with these color bars here. Okay. But if we come down here, we'll go ahead and move on. So this doesn't have to be a super long video. You can see that this graphic here, let me just throw something over here. This graphic here, it was imported and treat as legal. Okay. If we come to this graphic, this was imported and scale to legal. We just did all this, but this is on the timeline, so it's easier to see. Now this graphic here, this graphic was made to be legal, so the source was already legal. We imported it and then scaled it to legal. And you can see the differences in these graphics here. Again, our full screen is already on, at least it should be. Let's check and make sure. This is one thing you'll want to do in Media Composer, is always make sure you know what you're looking at. And see that? I totally forgot. I changed that to my project setting. So let's change that back to full range, because if we're going to export full range, we want to know what it's going to look like before we export it. Okay? Because what we're viewing here is the project, or 709. So Control-Shift-F, and I'll just use my arrow keys, and you can see the difference there. Whenever we imported this graphic, which again is RGB, so it's using a 0 to 255 color space. Okay, we imported it, but we treated it as legal, even though it's not legal. This is what it will look like if you export your video at full range. A bit darker than I would really want. Now this graphic is actually right, because this graphic again is RGB, it's computer generated, so it's 0 to 255. We imported it into Media Composer, scaling it from the full range to legal range. Now we're viewing it right now in full range again. So now it looks correct. Okay, but if this could be an artistic choice as well. If you want to import it and just treat it as legal. Okay, that can be an artistic choice. So we'll just use our arrow keys. Let's go to the next. There we go. Now this graphic, again, I turned it into legal by pulling it into Media Composer, then exporting it as legal, and then pulling it back in and saying, oh, well, this source, even though I know it's illegal, I'm going to import it as if it were RGB, as if it were not legal. And that is what this looks like if we view it at full range. Does that make sense? So this one here is the one that's technically correct. This one is not. Okay, and you'll really see that if we, again, change our color space that we're viewing full screen at to just our project setting, and now it looks really washed out. Okay. And there's that graphic if we view it in 709 space. And then this graphic here, which now kind of looks okay. This one kind of looks okay. The one that we imported and said treat it as legal, even though it wasn't. But if we export it as keep as legal, it may actually look okay. Again, you have to just understand all of this together. I kind of wanted to do multiple videos on this subject, maybe just going into the full screen playback settings. Let's go and change that back. And then the settings for our viewer here. But, I realized you really need to know all of this stuff, the import and the export settings, to understand why you would want to view a different color space in Media Composer. So we'll have a bit of a longer video here. Let's look at our color bars here. Now I did the same thing to these color bars. Now these are already 601 CCIR, and I imported them different ways. So I import them scale from full to legal. Then the same color bar, I imported it, do not modify, treat as legal. Okay. Same for this. All right. And again, this whole video on the timeline will be on YouTube for you to look at. And again, what you're seeing may be different from what I see, because you're the end user of this, and your monitor may not be set up correctly. One of these may look better to you than it does to me. It really depends on what your monitor is set up as. Okay, so if I import the same graphic here, and again, we're viewing in full range now. Okay, we imported this graphic, our color bars, we scaled it from full to legal range, and then we view it at full range. This is what that looks like versus this here. If we do not modify it when we already treat it as legal, then it looks like this here. All right, and of course, the same thing applies to your actual video clips as well. So like this video clip was imported and scaled to legal. Now we're viewing it at full range. Okay. Now if we view it at REC709, now the blacks are really washed out there. So it can depend on how you're importing and exporting your footage. That's really the point I'm making, is it depends on how you import and export your footage to how it's going to end up looking, in the end. All right. So just keep all that stuff in mind. So let's see, we covered our full screen playback and our different views. Let me go and change that back to full range. We covered our different color spaces, our viewing color spaces. Again, these do not affect what you're exporting. They don't affect your actual video file. This is just so you can view what it will look like. Okay. And we can change that for both of these. we can, let's see, let's call up some clip here. This clip right here, for example. Again, we're viewing this at the project setting. If we change this view here to full range, you can see the difference there in the dynamic range between these two. Which, let me go back to that. You see the difference very starkly right there. Control Shift F. You can see that. Again, we're viewing in full range here. Okay. And Control Shift F, it's going to look the same because we're viewing in full range. Okay. But all of these settings, they don't add up onto each other. Okay. These are just view modes. Okay. I just wanted to show you the difference of what that looks like. So keep in mind, whatever you're importing, if you're importing graphics, you may want to go ahead and scale those from full range to legal. If you're importing video, your video may need to be scaled from full range to legal range, or it may not need to be modified. I don't know what footage you're shooting, so I can't tell you exactly. If we changed these settings and we ended up scaling something from full to legal that was already in legal, and we've already covered that back here, then you end up getting this more washed out look. Even when you view it at full range, it may not, again, it depends on how you're going to output it. It may look okay if you export it at full range. But then again, it comes down to, what somebody's viewing it on. Okay. So this here actually looks correct. See that? So it looks okay viewing it at full range, but it's still, it's still not correct. All right. Just, keep all that in mind. And then we'll need to get to our export settings. Now this is where, it really comes in handy to understand the import. It comes in handy to know your display settings. And this is probably where you really get a lot of the problem with people talking about their image being too dark. Okay. So again, we're viewing at full range. If I know this is going out to full range, I know I would have to come in here to my effect, come in here and probably pull back on this gamma sum. And then I'll view this again full screen so I can see the full range. And now that looks about where I would want it, right? But if I know I'm going out to legal range, which we can go here and put this on 709 and look at that, well, then I may want to darken it up, darken it up a little bit more. Let's come back here again. I'll just pull this all the way up just to make the point. Again, it may look fine here, but if we go to our color space, full range, now you can see that impact very quickly, the difference. If we go full screen, you can really see that there. All right. Oh, this is on 709. Okay, I was going to say that looked a little bit, actually looked a little bit better. So full screen, it looks okay because we're doing 709. Put this back on full range. There we go. Now you can see how dark that is there. And we'll change this again here so you can really see that difference. See that? I've seen some videos and some complaints about people exporting from Media Composer or whatever, and then, their colors have shifted. The brights and darks have shifted. Something's getting clipped. And it's probably because you're viewing something at a different color space than you're exporting as. Okay. And plus, I don't know where you're uploading it to or where you're delivering it to. If you're delivering it somewhere that demands legal, then of course you should export it as legal. And then wherever they put it, it may expand that, whatever it's being viewed on, may expand that to the full range. Okay, again, I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm just telling you be aware of this. So again, we'll flip through this again. That's full range. And then that's our legal space there. Full range. And then legal space. All right, so keep that in mind whenever you're editing an Avid Media Composer to make sure you view your different display color spaces. Okay, and I would, again, probably just leave that on project and use my full screen playback to really see what's going on. All right, so we've already covered all of that stuff. You can see all that there. Now we'll go back to export. Now I like to export QuickTime Movie just because Media Composer works better with QuickTime Movie than anything else. You could do a QuickTime reference, and you'll still have the options for your color levels here. The reason I don't do a reference is simply because sometimes you can have a problem with the reference whenever you end up putting it into your encoder. Like I use Adobe Media Encoder or Handbrake or maybe Source and Squeeze or something like that. Sometimes it could be a problem whenever that reference is pulling from the files, and then you end up having to do it over. So, just what I like to do is, and you don't have to do this, I'm just telling you what I do, is QuickTime Movie. So that way I go same as source, it'll export rather quickly. That's how this video here was made. Export it same as source, so that way I have a high quality master. Then I can take that and throw that into Adobe Media Encoder or Handbrake or whatever, and then squeeze that down to something that you can actually upload, because the file, like this video file here, this video is going to end up being, I don't know, 40, 45, 50 minutes, something like that. This video file here is going to be maybe up to 90 gigs, right? And I'll squeeze that down to probably 2 gigs, okay, in our encoder whenever we put it into MP4. All right, so this is the other setting you need to be aware of, is your color levels here on your export. And that's why it's so important to know about your viewing modes here, your display color space. Okay, so if we're only displaying, if you're only looking at, I don't know if I've already said this, but I want to reiterate it. If you're only looking at your project settings and they happen to be REC709, and you're looking at this and it happens to look okay in Media Composer, so like this may look, it may look okay, whatever it happens to be. And then, so like this here may look okay whenever you're viewing it on full screen, but you don't realize it's at REC709. You'll say, okay, well, that actually looks pretty good right there. But then you export your file. And when you export it, you say, well, I'm going to YouTube, so I'm going to scale it from legal to full. Then what happens is you end up getting a video that looks like that. And it's much darker and much brighter in some areas too. You say, why is that happening? Well, that's the point of this video. That's why it's happening, because you're exporting it at full range, and you didn't consider that whenever you were color grading your footage, or whenever you were adding your effects, whenever you were editing your video. You didn't consider how you were exporting it. All right. So just to tie all of that up, you may want to keep it as legal range whenever you're exporting it to YouTube. Again, it matters so much, as we already saw on this imported footage. Import it, treat as illegal, which this graphic wasn't legal. Okay. But we're treating it as illegal. But then if we view it and we export it as legal, then it looks okay. It looks okay at that point. It's not perfect, but it looks okay. But on the other hand, if you are going to export this at scale from legal to full range, but you only view it at the legal range, then you're going to be upset whenever your footage looks like that. Again, it looks okay. It's just much darker. Whereas this here is actually the correct look right here. This is too dark. Okay. All right, so just, keep this part in mind of what you're going to export as. Again, I'm not going to tell you what you have to export it as. The video you're watching right now has been exported as full range from legal to full. Most of my videos are going to be full range, although I have messed around with legal range as well. And it looks fine. It looks okay. It just really depends on my import, my import, my export, however I edit and whatnot. Now you can come to, I mentioned talking about uploading to YouTube in the description and the, title there. And you can come to this page and see the recommended settings. I'm not going to go into it exactly. You can come to this page here if you want to know a little bit more about it. This video maker page, they'll go through it a little bit more, things I'm not going to cover here. All right. But this is your recommended upload settings. And, the way I'm doing it and the way I've uploaded the video on the timeline here, this whole video, uploaded this whole video to YouTube, and I did it twice. Okay. I did one as export. It was scale from legal to full range. So just as we talked about, scale from legal to full range. And then I did an export of the same thing, but this time keeping it as legal range. So that way you can see the difference. And you really need to watch this video here first that you're watching now, so you'll understand how the footage that you're seeing in in the video here on YouTube, how that was imported. So you can see this video here is this scale from legal to full range. So that way you can really see how YouTube is going to treat your footage whenever you check your different export settings. You can see that right there. This is the full range. So scale from legal to full range video. You can see there. We'll hop down here towards the end for our color bars. You can see how that's affected by YouTube there. Okay. But then, as I mentioned, I have the same video exported at legal range. Take a look at that. It's going to be important to view these at a 1080p. So look at this here. This is the legal range video here. What we watched before was the full range. If you come down here to our color bars, you can probably see that. But you can test this on your own monitor to see maybe your monitor is not set up correctly. Again, what I'm seeing could be completely different from what you're seeing as well. So just wanted to mention that you can come in here. So if we look at this full screen, and this is the keep as legal range, you can see that this color here isn't exactly correct. Okay. If we come back to Media Composer, you can see that. Again, that dark area there, you can see how dark it really is. Whereas if we come back here, let's go back to the scale from legal to full range. So this is the full range video. We'll come up here to this part and full screen. And now you can see it looks exactly like what you actually see on the Media Composer I'm using at this moment. So take a look at that gray area, that dark, almost black color there. And now look at it here, and it's exactly the same. And then I guess I should mention that both of those videos, they're right here. Okay. Both of these were exported. I guess I could go to V here. They're both right here. You can see they're exactly the same size, 2.89 gigs. Okay. And they're right here. And both of them were encoded using Adobe Media Encoder, using this preset here, except I went ahead and bumped this up to 15 and to 20. And that made about a 200 and, there's like a check here. Go. So our legal video is 202 megabytes and our full range video is 206 megabytes. Okay. But they were exported exactly the same into an MP4 container because that's what we just saw YouTube recommends. Okay. I'm not saying you have to do MP4. You could do high quality if you want, but it could be a bit much. So they were exported exactly the same, and they are there on YouTube for you to look at. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to a couple more other things. I think we covered everything I need to talk about. I really just wanted to show you this in action, so you could see this happening right before your eyes and the differences whenever we import at a certain level, whenever we view at a certain level. See, look at the difference in that. Whenever we view this at different levels, and then whenever we export it at different levels. Okay, so I just wanted to show you all that. Now, if you want a better explanation of all of this and a much more technical explanation, come here to this website here. Again, it's going to be linked below. This is a full run through of your color spaces in Media Composer. Okay. It's a very good video, very informative video. I'll turn this down a little bit. That will tell you all about your color spaces. It'll go through a lot of the stuff I've already talked about. Okay. And, plus much more, plus like changing the color encoding of your source footage there that you can do color transformations on. Okay. After you've imported it, a bunch of really interesting things that will expand on what I've already talked about. Okay. But it's going to do it in a much more technical way. So be sure to watch this video right after you watch this video and right after you watch the videos, on this timeline here. Okay. Be sure to come and watch this video right here. Very important. Again, this will be linked for you below. Okay. So the next, and I think the last thing, or at least one of the last things, need to talk about the format. So look, of course, the color space you're working in is going to affect everything else. I'm not going to get into that. They'll get into that in that video that I just mentioned there. Okay, but that's going to affect things as well. Whether it's going to be YCBCR or RGB. Again, like I said up top, I usually work in YCBCR 709, even though like right now I'm doing something that was captured on a computer. I still work in this color space. That's one of the last things you need to be aware of, but definitely be aware of your import settings. And by the way, that import setting it's just going to stay there. Okay, so if you're going to be pulling media in, and you happen to pull in a graphic first, and you have it on scale from full range to legal, which is probably what you're going to want, and then I were to come to say an aerial shot that I know is legal, but my import is scale from full range to legal, it's going to end up being a bit lighter, just like this was here, because this source was already legal, and it made it a bit lighter overall, and the darks aren't as deep. Whereas say this clip here was of course imported to keep it treated as legal. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you're pulling stuff in to import it, that if I'm pulling in a graphic, I'll probably choose this scale from full to legal. If I'm pulling in video, I'll probably choose do not modify, treat as legal. Again, it depends greatly on what you're shooting with, and it also depends on the effect you want for your final composition. What I really suggest is that you just understand your options for import, export, and your viewing modes. And then you come in here and you pull in some very short footage, 10 seconds, 20 seconds long. And on one import, use this option. On the other import, use this option, and then compare them side to side. And then also, go through all of your different display color spaces and see how that affects what your footage looks like. All right, so I think the last thing I need to talk about is something we have absolutely no control over, and that's the consumer of your media. And this is where some people say, well, it doesn't really matter because you have zero control over your user or your consumer. I have zero control over how you're viewing this video right now. I have no idea. Right now, I just want to show you this here. Every computer can be different. Okay, my computer is set to how do you make color adjustments? Well, with the video player settings. So that can change. So I'm viewing RGB, of course. It's a computer, but someone may have an option set on their computer. Like if I chose with NVIDIA settings, then I could choose my dynamic range to be 16 to 235. And then everything I'm seeing will be in the legal range. Now, if something is delivered at a legal range and it's not expanded, there's a possibility, again, depending on the monitor, okay, where you could end up viewing something that's already legal and then viewing it in the legal range, and it may end up looking like this to your viewer. It's kind of washed out. Whereas if they're viewing it at full range, it should look more like this, which I guess we should change that to full range there. Okay, but even looking at this at full range, it doesn't look quite right. I just want to make sure you're aware of all of these different options and export settings. And then again, something we have zero control over is our user. Okay. And that's also another reason I want to mention this here, how you may have your computer set up. Users have less control over, say, a phone or a tablet. Those will probably be set up with a full range of colors. Okay. So that's why media played on your computer or even media played on YouTube can look vastly different depending on what you're viewing it on, okay, is the settings that each device may have. Like I said earlier, what I suggest you do is you keep in mind everything I've showed you here, all of the options from our import, our export, your format, and of course your ability to view the different color spaces. Keep all that in mind. Import a bunch of short clips into Media Composer or whatever NLE you happen to be using, and import them and export them at different color levels, and then upload it to YouTube and see how it comes out.